All right, let's get into it. Today we're talking about one of the oldest and honestly most powerful operating systems ever designed for the human mind. And no, it's not code, it's philosophy.
You know that feeling, right? When you hit a mental wall and you just know there's a bug in your thinking somewhere, a core belief that just isn't compiling correctly anymore? Well, that process, that's exactly what we're talking about today.
And this is where philosophy comes in. Seriously, think of it as a brand new, powerful OS for your brain. It's designed to help you inspect, question, and totally refine the very foundations of how you think. So yeah, I'd say it's time for an upgrade.
So, what is this new OS, really? Well, at its core, philosophy is a systematic way of tackling the biggest questions out there. Like, what is consciousness, actually? Do we really have free will? And how in the world are we supposed to live? It's not just aimless wondering. It's a structured approach to finding real answers. And you can forget that old image of dusty books and stuffy professors. Philosophy is a live, practical toolkit. It gives you the mental hardware to build better arguments, make clearer decisions, and just live a more examined life. So let's unbox this thing and see what's inside.
So the first tool we're pulling out of the box is called epistemology. And wow, does it tackle a fundamental question, one we almost never think to ask. How do we actually know the things we think we know? Think of epistemology as the ultimate diagnostic program for your own knowledge. It makes you ask the tough questions. Is this belief of mine based on solid evidence, or is it just a gut feeling? How can I justify this as a fact, not just my opinion? It really puts all of our sources of knowledge under a microscope.
And that leads to a really profound problem. I mean, think about it for a second. Can you be absolutely 100% certain about anything? Epistemology is the tool that helps you grapple with the very real limits of certainty and what it even means to know something in the first place. Okay, next up in the toolkit is metaphysics. This is the tool that zooms all the way out to tackle the absolute biggest questions you can imagine. Metaphysics basically digs into the fundamental structure of reality itself. It's asking, what does it even mean for something to exist? Is the world just physical stuff, atoms and energy? Or is something like consciousness more fundamental? You could say it's the part of philosophy that tries to read the source code of reality. And believe me, this isn't just some abstract thought exercise. Think about yourself. You're literally made of different cells than you were 5 years ago. You have different memories, different beliefs. So in what sense are you the same person? That right there is a classic metaphysical puzzle about personal identity. All right, our next tool is one you're already using every single day, whether you realize it or not. It's your internal guide for navigating all of life's tough calls: ethics. Ethics gives us a framework for our moral code. It pushes us way beyond just doing what feels right in the moment and forces us to build a consistent, justifiable system for figuring out right from wrong. And there are different ways to approach it, kind of like different algorithms for solving the same problem. You've got consequentialism, which looks at the outcome, what creates the most good for the most people. But then you have deontology, which focuses on duties and rules, saying some actions are just fundamentally right or wrong, no matter what happens next. And that brings us to the final and maybe most important tool in our kit. This is the one that holds everything else together. It's logic, the ultimate debugger for your thinking. Logic is literally the syntax of rational thought. It provides the strict rules that make sure your conclusions actually follow from your starting points. Without it, our thinking is just riddled with bugs. We call them logical fallacies, and they lead to all sorts of faulty conclusions. So here's a basic little algorithm for reasoning. It's a rule called modus ponens. It says, if P is true, then Q is true. We know P is true, therefore Q must be true. Simple, right? Like if it's raining, that's P, then the street will be wet, that's Q. Hey look, it's raining, therefore the street is wet. When your premises are true and your logic is valid, your conclusion is guaranteed. That's the power of it. So we've unboxed the whole toolkit: epistemology, metaphysics, ethics, and logic. Awesome. Now, how do you actually use them? Well, it's time to open up the user manual. Thinking like a philosopher is basically a 3-step process. First, you start with conceptual analysis. You gotta define exactly what you're talking about. Then comes critical questioning. You have to challenge your own hidden assumptions. And finally, you run simulations in your mind called thought experiments to really test your ideas and see where they lead. A perfect example of this is the famous trolley problem. It's a completely imaginary scenario, but it's designed specifically to isolate a single moral variable, like the difference between actively doing harm versus passively allowing harm, so you can really stress test your own ethical framework.
Okay, so we've got this powerful toolkit, this new OS for the brain. But why does any of this actually matter? What's the real-world application here?
Well, the ancient Greek philosopher Socrates probably put it best. He said, "The unexamined life is not worth living." I mean, if we don't ever stop to look at our own beliefs, our values, our lives, are we truly living or are we just running on autopilot? And that's the bottom line. Philosophy gives you the power of choice. It lets you consciously choose what you believe and what you value, instead of just inheriting it all from somewhere else. It's the difference between being a passive user of your own life and an active developer. The philosopher Bertrand Russell put the alternative in really stark terms. He warned that without philosophy, we're basically imprisoned by prejudices we don't even know we have, the stuff that just passes for common sense. Philosophy is the key to that prison door. So I'll leave you with this question. With this new OS installed, what's the first bug in your own thinking that you're ready to challenge?